One thing became very clear as the Pittsburgh Steelers wrapped up their OTA sessions. This team is entering a completely different era, and the changes happening inside the building are already impossible to ignore. The biggest takeaway coming out of these practices is not a single player, a specific play, or even a position battle. It's the culture. Everything points to a much different atmosphere under head coach Mike McCarthy, and according to reports coming from people connected to the organization, the pace and intensity have been noticeably different from what players experienced in previous years. The message coming out of the facility is simple: there is no wasted time. Practices are moving fast, players are constantly engaged, and the coaching staff appears focused on maximizing every possible minute within league rules. The impression being shared is that this staff has brought a much more detail-oriented approach to the football side of the operation. For Steelers fans, this could be one of the most important developments of the entire offseason. Whenever a new coaching staff arrives, there is naturally a period of adjustment. Players must learn new terminology, new expectations, and new ways of preparing. But what makes this situation particularly interesting is that many observers believe the Steelers needed exactly this kind of shakeup after years of relative continuity. At the same time, there is another major storyline developing during these OTA practices. The defense appears to be ahead of the offense. Now, before anyone starts sounding the alarm, this is actually a fairly common occurrence across the NFL, especially when a team is implementing new offensive concepts. Defensive systems are generally easier to install during the early stages of the offseason, while offensive units require significant time to develop chemistry, timing, and communication. That appears to be exactly what is happening in Pittsburgh right now. Reports from practice indicate that the offense experienced more turnovers than coaches would have liked. There were missed opportunities, tipped passes, and mistakes that resulted in interceptions. While nobody wants to see turnovers, this stage of the offseason is often where those mistakes are identified and corrected. The encouraging part for Steelers fans is that Aaron Rodgers has participated in nearly all of the OTA sessions. Unlike last year, when valuable practice reps were limited during portions of the offseason, Rodgers has been actively working with teammates and helping build the chemistry that this offense will need once training camp begins in Latrobe. That extra work could prove extremely valuable later in the year. Another fascinating development coming out of OTA practices is the growing picture of what Mike McCarthy's offense may actually look like. Many people assumed Pittsburgh would simply import the same pass-heavy approach that McCarthy utilized during portions of his time with the Dallas Cowboys, but everything we are hearing suggests that assumption may have been completely wrong. Instead, the Steelers appear committed to building a physical, AFC North-style offense centered around heavy personnel packages, multiple tight ends, multiple running backs, and a powerful running game. This is where things start to get very interesting. The Steelers have several players who seem perfectly suited for this philosophy. Darnell Washington, for example, could become one of the most important pieces of the entire offense. While some people continue to view him as simply a secondary tight end, the reality is that his combination of size, blocking ability, strength, and receiving skills creates matchup problems that very few teams can replicate. Washington gives Pittsburgh flexibility. He allows the offense to disguise intentions. One play can look like a run formation before suddenly becoming a passing opportunity. The next play can feature him overwhelming defenders at the point of attack. Then there is Pat Freiermuth, whose receiving ability gives Aaron Rodgers another reliable target in the middle of the field. Together, Freiermuth and Washington could become one of the most productive tight end combinations in the league. And that's not where the versatility ends. The Steelers also appear prepared to utilize fullback Riley Leonard Nowakowski in meaningful situations. His ability as a lead blocker and his potential after the catch could provide another dimension to the offense. Add in the possibility of two running back sets, and even jumbo packages featuring extra offensive linemen, and suddenly Pittsburgh possesses numerous ways to attack opposing defenses. The overall vision seems obvious. This is not an offense designed simply to spread the field and throw the ball 50 times per game. This is an offense that wants to dictate physicality, control the line of scrimmage, and force opponents to deal with multiple personnel groupings that can create confusion before the snap. And while the offense continues working through its growing pains, another major battle is quietly taking shape behind Aaron Rodgers. The backup quarterback competition is beginning to attract serious attention. Will Howard appears to be gaining momentum. Multiple reports indicate that Howard has been receiving significant opportunities during practices and has responded well to those chances. At this point in the offseason, there is growing belief that he currently holds the inside track to become the Steelers' primary backup quarterback. That doesn't mean the competition is over. Training camp and preseason games will ultimately determine the outcome. But as things stand right now, Howard has put himself firmly in the conversation and may have more momentum than many expected entering the summer. And that creates an intriguing question as the Steelers prepare for Latrobe. If Will Howard continues to impress and the offense begins finding its rhythm, could Pittsburgh be uncovering one of the most important long-term pieces of its future, while simultaneously building a new offensive identity under Mike McCarthy? The quarterback battle is only one piece of the puzzle, because another player generating attention during OTA practices is Roman Wilson. For Steelers fans, this is a familiar story. Every offseason seems to bring reports about Wilson making plays during non-contact practices, and this year is no different. By all accounts, he has looked explosive, confident, and capable of creating separation. One of the biggest highlights from OTAs was reportedly a deep touchdown connection with Aaron Rodgers that traveled more than 70 yards through the air. Those are the kinds of plays that naturally generate excitement. But there is also a reality that both coaches and fans understand. The true test for Roman Wilson has never been what happens in shorts and helmets. The real evaluation begins when the pads come on in Latrobe. That's where roster spots are won, depth charts are solidified, and players prove whether their offseason momentum can translate into real football situations. Still, the role Pittsburgh appears to envision for Wilson is fascinating. He is being utilized as a vertical threat from the slot, someone capable of stretching defenses downfield while creating explosive plays. If that role continues to develop, Wilson could become a valuable weapon inside Mike McCarthy's offense, especially with defenses focusing significant attention on other skill players. The offensive line is another area that deserves attention because there appears to be a developing battle at right guard. Spencer Anderson currently seems to have positioned himself as the early leader for that job. Throughout OTA sessions, Anderson maintained his place with the first group, and that alone is noteworthy. While training camp competition is still ahead, holding on to that role throughout the spring gives him an important advantage heading into the summer. The expectation is that Anderson, Ryan McCollum Hoffman, and rookie Jennings Dunker will continue competing once training camp begins. However, at this stage, Anderson appears to control his own destiny. If he performs well in Latrobe and avoids major mistakes, he could emerge as the opening day starter. But while much of the attention has focused on the offense, some of the most significant developments may actually be happening on the defensive side of the ball. One of the strongest indicators from OTAs is that Pittsburgh's defense is preparing to become far more deceptive than it has been in recent years. A major component of that change involves increased use of two high safety looks before the snap. For opposing quarterbacks, that creates uncertainty. When a defense consistently presents two safeties deep, it becomes much harder to predict what coverage is coming. The defense can remain in a two high structure, rotate into a single high look, transition into match coverage concepts, or disguise completely different intentions. The goal is simple: force quarterbacks to hesitate. In today's NFL, even a brief moment of hesitation can completely disrupt an offense. What makes this strategy particularly interesting is that it normally creates concerns against the running game. Traditionally, placing two safeties deep can leave defenses vulnerable near the line of scrimmage, but Pittsburgh appears to have a solution. That solution is Jalen Ramsey. At this stage of his career, Ramsey may not be the same player who once shadowed elite receivers all over the field. However, what he still possesses is tremendous football intelligence, outstanding tackling ability, physicality, and exceptional instincts. Those traits make him ideally suited for the big nickel role that has become increasingly important in modern defenses. The position demands a rare combination of skills. A player must be strong enough to help against the run, willing to take on blocks, physical enough to make tackles near the line of scrimmage, and athletic enough to handle coverage responsibilities in the slot. Very few players can do all of those things effectively. Ramsey can. That versatility allows Pittsburgh to remain in deceptive defensive structures without sacrificing toughness against the run. And when you begin looking at the rest of the secondary, the possibilities become even more intriguing. Joey Porter Jr. and veteran cornerback Jamel Dean give the Steelers two perimeter defenders capable of playing aggressive man coverage. That combination could unlock a much wider variety of defensive calls. Imagine an offense lining up against Pittsburgh. Before the snap, the defense shows a two-high shell. The quarterback studies the formation and attempts to identify the coverage. Then the ball is snapped. Suddenly, one safety rotates down. Ramsey shifts into a different responsibility. The corners lock onto receivers. A linebacker attacks the line of scrimmage. What looked like one coverage becomes something entirely different. That is exactly the type of confusion Patrick Graham appears determined to create. And perhaps the most exciting aspect for Steelers fans is that the deception doesn't stop in the secondary. It extends directly to the pass rush. Patrick Graham has built a reputation throughout his career for creative pressure packages, and the Steelers possess the personnel to fully embrace that philosophy. Look across the roster. Patrick Queen can blitz. Peyton Wilson can blitz. Jalen Ramsey can blitz. Deshaun Elliott can blitz. Jaquan Brisker can blitz. The Steelers have impact players at multiple positions who can threaten offenses from different angles. That creates endless possibilities for disguising pressure. An offense may believe pressure is coming from one side, only to discover it is arriving from another. A linebacker may appear ready to attack before dropping into coverage. A defensive back may show coverage before suddenly becoming an extra pass rusher. The uncertainty alone can create problems for opposing quarterbacks. And there is one player who could benefit tremendously from this approach: Peyton Wilson. Everything coming out of OTAs suggests that Wilson is taking on increased responsibilities within the defense. His communication role appears to be growing, and his athletic skill set seems perfectly matched for a system that values versatility and aggression. The Steelers may be preparing to unleash him in ways fans have not seen before. And if that happens, Pittsburgh's defense could become one of the most unpredictable units in the NFL. While much of the attention throughout the offseason has naturally focused on Aaron Rodgers, the new coaching staff, and the offensive changes taking place in Pittsburgh, Black may quietly be one of the most important players to watch as training camp approaches. During OTA sessions, Black spent significant time working at nose tackle. At first glance, that may not sound surprising. After all, when fans look at his size and physical profile, the assumption is often that nose tackle should be his natural position, but the reality is more complicated than that. Under the previous coaching staff, Black frequently aligned at the four-eyed defensive end position within the Steelers' front. Even going back to his college career, he was often viewed as a player whose strength came from penetration and disruption, rather than simply absorbing double teams at the line of scrimmage. The challenge with playing nose tackle is different. It requires discipline, leverage, and technique on every snap. A player can possess